event. And so we are going to have a wonderful chat with local community experts around fair and livable wages, and we're really thrilled that you've decided to spend your lunch hour with us. I am Sheraton Love, the co-chair of the REA, or Research, Education, and Advocacy Committee. I saw my lovely co-chair, Irma, there. She could wave, yes. And anyone who is on the committee, the REA committee, please also wave. We work together quite a bit to put on these events for you. And we've heard from you over the last 2 years of how much advocacy means to you, and you want to be armed with the information and know our local community agencies who do such great work. So that is what today is about. I've been with the fund since 2015 or so in a lot of varying roles, but this committee has always been very important to me. One, for the report that we give out every other year that gives a lot of standing information about where Forsyth County is for women and girls across a lot of different economic areas, as well as having these events with you all to share kind of the landscape of where Winston and Forsyth County is. So I won't take up too much of your time, but just to thank you all for being here today. If you want to share with us in the chat while we get started where you're from or how you're connected to the Women's Fund, just to engage a little bit, that will be totally fine. But now that we're kind of all here and ready to get started, I'm going to kick it over to Shamika to give us more about the Women's Fund in case you need a little bit more information about who we are.
Thanks so much, Sheraton, and thanks all of you for, again, being with us today on this, I almost said Wednesday, and it's Tuesday, so the week is already getting away from me, but just so glad that you could be here today. I thought I would just get us started with providing us a little bit of context on the event, so I'll go ahead and create some visuals. I'm going to share my screen quickly. We're going to stop sharing the screen quickly to make sure that I have it together. One moment. All right, here's the Zoom. Technology is fun. Okay. And hopefully you all can see that. Great. And so for those who may not be familiar with me, my name is Shamika Stark, and I am Director of Strategic Initiatives with the Winston-Salem Foundation. And the Foundation's 3 initiatives include, in addition to our Women's Fund, we also have the Black Philanthropy Initiative and our Youth Grantmakers in Action. And so before I turn over the presentation to our guests today, Vivian and Courtney, I just wanted to share a little bit about the Women's Fund and some context for today's event for those who may be participating with or joining the Ideas to Action for the first time. So the Women's Fund includes hundreds of members each year, and collectively we give our time, their talents and treasures to build economic security for women and girls in Forsyth County. And so through the power of collective giving, the fund grants over $100,000 each year to a variety of local programs and initiatives that are working to positively impact the economic security for women and girls in Forsyth County. And last fall, we were thrilled to announce we invested over $2 million to date in grant funding to local organizations. And so that was a great milestone that the fund was very much thrilled and excited to kind of reach, and look forward to be able to investing more this year in our fall grant cycle. Membership to the Women's Fund is open to anyone who would like to share their time, their talents, or treasures with the fund to help further our mission. And when you do join as a member, you also receive an equal vote in our annual grant making process, which allows the opportunity for you to lend your voice to the process in deciding how the Women's Fund invests its grant dollars into the community. And so in addition to its annual grants program, the fund also hosts a variety of events and programs like today's. And we also collaborate with community partners to provide research reports on data relating to economic security and other issue areas that impact women and girls in Forsyth County here locally. And so we know that funding programs and initiatives alone will not lead to systems change that we're really wanting to see to advance economic security for women and girls. And so we're just really grateful for opportunities like today that allow us the chance to just share knowledge, to raise awareness, and hopefully provide additional insight on ways that you as individuals can advocate and take action in ways that are meaningful for you. And collectively, our hope is that our actions can lead to meaningful change together. And so next, I'll just briefly recap the ideas to action and how we got here today. And so in November of 2020, the Women's Fund launched its most recent data report through a gender lens in the form of a microsite. And you can visit the site at wfgenderlens.org. But this is the third report that the Women's Fund has released to the community since 2010. And it features data specific to women and girls in Forsyth County. And so this slide in particular shows 6 key findings from that report. And the Women's Fund Research, Education, and Advocacy Committee, also known as the REA Committee, worked alongside our data partner, Forsyth Futures, to develop the report and decided that instead of providing recommendations on what actions our community should take, like we had done with our previous reports, that we should invite the community and their voices to help determine recommendations for action that we would take as a community. And so with this in mind, the REA committee planned a community conversation series, which was launched in February of 2021. And the goal of the 3-session series was to have as many people as possible come together and provide input on what actions the Women's Fund and the broader community should consider to help improve the economic security of women and girls in Forsyth County. And so from those 3 conversations, we identified 4 themes that continue to inform our work. The first theme spoke to our need to kind of address root causes of the issue areas that we see in the data and have significant systems level policy change in order to have kind of a meaningful impact when it comes to economic security of women and girls. The second theme spoke to the need to ensure that women and girls of color and women and girls with either current or recent lived experience relative to the issue areas are involved in any advocacy efforts since they are essentially the experts of their own experience. Third, a major barrier to change was kind of the lack of clarity around direction as we think about where to begin when dealing with such grand or complex issues. And the fourth and final theme, similarly, we heard a desire to kind of learn more about local advocacy efforts related to the issue areas and how we can join kind of local organize efforts that build collective purpose and power in ways that we can't do alone. And so based on those 4 themes, we invited the community to join us in the summer of 2021 to hear a panel discussion featuring advocates in 4 key areas identified during the community conversation, and to engage in conversation with one another as well. We invited the community to join us and also kind of talk through and explore what individual action could look like. It was such an incredible event. We got amazing feedback, but we also heard that they needed a little bit more time to be able to gain a deeper understanding on each action area and how one might take action. And as a result, the REA committee decided to plan a 4-part series of events, the ideas to action, and each one was focused on a single topic area. And so as you see listed on the screen, the first area was around affordable housing options, which was hosted in March of 2022. We heard from local leaders on shifting the balance of power in housing to be more equitable and fair and just. And we also learned new ways to advocate for reforms and emergency relief. The second session was focused on equitable public education. And in June of 2022, we toured an amazing, innovative online exhibit, Rooted in Race, and also kind of detailed insights from both the local and state level, as well as we kind of talk through ways that people may advocate related to education. And the third session was on, and this year was on improved access to childcare. We held that session in February, we had amazing turnout as well then. And then today's session will focus on our fair and livable wages, where we'll learn more about local strategies and research around Forsyth County's living wage and ways that we can take action as individuals. And so today's program will have a presentation from a joint presentation from Vivian Perez Chandler with the Asset Building Coalition and Dr. Courtney Blue with Forsyth Futures. And we can't thank them enough for just agreeing to join us today and sharing just their time and their perspectives from the lens of their work. And so after we hear from Vivian and Dr. Courtney Blue, we will kind of break out into we'll have two breakout room options available to dive into deeper discussion, and as well as have a short Q&A portion as well. And those two rooms will be one focused on livable wage certification program here in Forsyth County, and the second room on data and methodology. And so at that time, we will prompt and give you the opportunity to select a room of your choosing based on your interests. And so after about 25 minutes or so, we'll come back together to this main room, and Courtney and Vivian will just close us out with some call to action and closing remarks as well. And so that I'm not holding up the time, I will stop sharing and pass it over to our wonderful friends, Courtney and Vivian, to take us away. Thank you so much again for being here.
Thank you so much, Shamika, and everyone that made today possible. We are extremely excited and honored to be here and share with you some of the findings, as well as the importance of fair and livable wages. And so to kind of start us off, you know, as we go on to who is the Asset Building Coalition? You know, the Asset Building Coalition, our mission is to build, rebuild, and protect the assets of residents of Winston-Salem and Forsyth County, with a vision where a community, all the people in our community have an opportunity for financial stability. How we started the ABC, it actually goes back to 2012. There was a municipal economic report, profile report, that was done in our county, which highlighted that about 22% of Forsyth County families were living in what they called extreme asset poverty. And ABC really wanted to, or a group of individuals wanted to raise awareness, because one of the recommendations from this report was actually to form a coalition. And so that's kind of how ABC started, was out of that one recommendation, which was to raise awareness about this before people would have an emergency that could lead them into poverty. And based on this report, you know, we also know that at this point, that statistic has changed. And we do want to highlight that the way in which the data was looked at back in 2012, the estimates are calculated at a state level and then adjusted to a local demographic. So those specific measures are based on modeled estimates. And so we do want to highlight that piece. As we get into our work, so what is asset poverty? Asset poverty is when a family or an individual don't have 3 months worth of savings in their bank account, when their income is to be interrupted. And so not having 3 months to cover basic needs, as we see those including household utilities, utilities, food, transportation, and childcare. And so what we know now is that, you know, without 3 months worth of money to cover those basic needs, a family is at risk of losing financial stability in the event of job losses, illness, injuries, and some other financial disruptions. And what also happens is that families have to choose which one they will go without because they are living in asset poverty. So as we head into what's happening now, as of 2019, what we know is that about 1 in 4 North Carolina households is experiencing asset poverty. And if we look at identifying issues of equity, as a community, it is critical that we take note of instances when the outcomes experienced by one group are disproportionate to the outcomes experienced by another. So we probably hear this a lot because it is a reality that our minorities and people of color are the ones that are primarily impacted by asset poverty. And, you know, one of the things that at ABC, as we talk about financial stability, we also recognize that there are various different factors that attribute to someone's financial stability. And so here we see the various different ways in which we can create asset building factors. And some of the ways that we see as income, debt, healthcare and insurance, housing, education, business, and jobs. We know that all of these asset building factors have a positive impact or a reinforcing effect on a person's financial stability and contribute to building asset wealth in a positive way. So what does ABC do altogether? There are multiple ways, multiple things that we do. And so as a coalition, we actually have about 42 members, and these are composed of for-profits, nonprofits, individuals in the community. We have city and government. We also have financial institutions. And our goal is to, by working together, to raise awareness, but also look at how we can find strategies that build asset wealth in our community, looking at how in our learnings, we can each take some of those learnings back into our own spaces and really work together on building asset wealth for our community. And so here we see ABC focuses on 4 specific initiatives, which is advocacy, mitigating the benefits cliff, the livable wage certification program, and financial capabilities. And so today we're here to discuss the livable wage certification program as it relates to fair and livable wages. And so our organization, along with our coalition, we champion the idea of a living wage as a tool to achieve greater financial stability for more people in our community. And to this end, the ABC is working to establish a locally adjusted living wage certification program for our county employers, similar to successful programs that exist in other parts of the United States and North Carolina. So through a partnership with Foresight Futures, ABC began to really investigate what it would take for families in Forsyth County to earn living wages. We know that there are various tools and calculators that have been created throughout the country, but we really wanted to look and dig deeper to have an equitable lens as we looked at this, and you know, an accurate lens of what are some of those expenses in our community. And so I am going to turn it over to Dr. Blue here, so she can go in and tell us a little bit more of the a high level kind of the data and methodology aspect.
All right. Hi, everyone. I also just want to reiterate the thanks and gratitudes to the Women's Fund for organizing this and also having us be a part of this. So to give you kind of some background or on, you know, how we got to where we are with the living wage in Forsyth County. is you can kind of break down this work, this living wage work, into kind of, and how to calculate the living wage into kind of two major buckets. The first major bucket has to do with the expenses, right? What are people spending on a month-to-month basis or an annual basis? Those necessary or kind of needed living expenses. And then the second kind of major bucket or task has to do with calculating the actual wage. So for the first major bucket of kind of work is involving the expenses. And ABC's living wage measure lifts kind of the basic premise from Foresight Futures income and sufficiency measure, which basically is just comparing estimated household expenses to their income. It was based initially off of MIT's living wage calculator, if anyone is familiar with that. It is a measure that we track on our community data webpage. And we kind of developed it as an alternative measure to financial stability, or in this case, financial instability, right? Because it's income insufficiency. Because the poverty kind of rate has its own limitations about, measuring financial hardship. So we wanted another way to kind of capture people's financial stability or instability in the county. So as I mentioned, those expenses, there are kind of major categories of expenses. I'll get more into them later in the breakout rooms. Basically, we have our childcare expense that includes both our childcare center day rates as well as before and after childcare and summer care. We have our food costs. We have healthcare, and as a note, healthcare does include the out-of-pocket costs as well as health insurance. We have our housing costs. We have our 10% savings piece, right? Because ABC's mission is building that asset poverty up, or trying to reduce that. We have taxes or tax liabilities, transportation, and then a major kind of bucket of that we just label kind of other household expenses, mainly dealing with personal or kind of household level type of miscellaneous things. I put up their examples: clothing, apparel, phone service, internet's in there, housekeeping supplies is in there, things like that. So most important thing to remember with these expenses and other living wage calculators is that most of these expenses are based on averages. And these are estimated expenses. They are not required expenses. Some people may need more than what we estimate. Some people may need less. It does really depend on people's kind of household budget. So again, these are estimated, not required. So as I mentioned, the income insufficiency measure was kind of the starting point for ABC's living wage, and changes were made to that bucket of work, specifically to those expenses. So one of the major changes is now that we now have a more robust childcare expense. Previously, the income insufficiency measure only captured childcare center rates. We did not capture anything about before or after care or summer care. So now our childcare measure is a more year-round kind of expense measure. And again, we added the savings piece to this. We did not have a savings piece in the original income insufficiency measure. We'll discuss more in the breakout rooms how we got to that 10%, because there was internal discussion and lots of number crunching before we got there. Additionally, we added a internet and cell phone expense. The original income insufficiency measure did not include that. And, especially after the, well, I don't know if it's after, but COVID, really just cell phones and Wi-Fi is just so critical to people's expenses. It's no longer kind of a luxury expense. It's really a necessary expense. And it also matches what other living wage calculators have done. MIT, for example, they have also updated their metrics to include this new reality as well. So those have to do with the expenses, right? That first bucket of stuff, right? All the expenses, what are people's spending money on, or what do we think they're spending their money on? The next big major piece of this then is figuring out what is the wage for the county. So, and as a reminder, right, the minimum wage in this state and in this country overall is $7.25. You can get, that gets us to about $15,000 a year full time. That has been unchanged since 2009. We've effectively have gone through 2 recessions and the minimum wage has gone unchanged. So we know that a minimum wage is not enough for most people. That's right. That's why a lot of people with one minimum wage job will take on another minimum wage job to help offset those costs. So, and the major difference too between our living wage versus the MIT living wage, United Way's living wage, or even Orange County, North Carolina's living wage, is we have one wage for the entire county. If you go to United Way's self-sufficiency standard, they'll give you wages by the composition of the household, right? Depending on how many working adults are in the household, if children are included or not. And we wanted to be able to say, here is a wage for the county. So that way you don't have to look who's in the household to decide what people deserve to be paid to meet their expenses. So that is the major difference. I'm clicking and it's not going. Also, I apologize. My clicker on my mouse is very loud. So if you've been hearing that, sorry. But it also might be my anger. Okay, so there we go. So our living wage for the county was estimated to be about $20.39 in 2021 dollars. And how we got to this $20.39, this one wage for the entire county, really was an iterative process between the ABC Living Wage Committee and Forsyth Futures. The committee looked at numbers and had discussions about including childcare or not, because it's such a major expense for families, especially right. The more children in the household you have, the more it goes up. And what it means to actually, if we were to include it or exclude it from the equation, what would that mean in terms of equity, right? Who is that helping? Who would that be hurting? Additionally, we had lots of discussions about the savings expense, right? Whether or not, 20% is the ideal, 15%, 10%, if there should be an alternative. We ended up discussing with the committee as well as kind of financial pathways, kind of best practices, and settled on a savings expense that we thought was feasible, as well as something that people can build towards as well. Another kind of major decision had to do with who is included in or who's represented with that $20.39. So what we ended up doing is including working adults in the county between the ages of 18 and 65, which means that people that are unemployed, not in the labor force, or anyone receiving supplemental Social Security income, SSI, they will not be represented in this number. Now, you might be asking yourself, why would you exclude anyone receiving SSI? That 2039 number, that living wage, is a full-time living wage, which means 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year. Wait, 40 hours a week, 52. Yeah, that's right. I see Vivian trying to check my math real quick, and I'm like, I think that's right. So that is why we make the assumption that if you are receiving SSI, that you are not able to work full-time year-round. So that is why that we exclude them from that. Additionally, we looked at wages at different levels. We looked at the mean, the median, or the 50th percentile, the 75th percentile, the 90th percentile. And a reminder, the percentiles is just the percentage of people below or above a given estimate. You'll usually hear percentiles being talked about in educational spaces, right? My kid scored, I don't know, in the 95th percentile of reading. those. So that means your child then scored, you know, better than 95%, 5% did better than them. Same here. If a, you know, living wage is at the 50th percentile, that means that it would cover 50% of working adults between the ages of 18 and 65. It would not cover the other 50% of the population. And part of these discussions and why we were kind of looking at these wages at different levels is because there is an equity kind of lens or consideration to this. You know, we know from the income insufficiency measure that we track on our website that that there are disparities in who is not able to meet their estimated household expenses, right? There are disparities by race, ethnicity, by age, by educational attainment. Depending on the year, sometimes there's a gap between men and women, and there are certainly gaps between households with children present and households without children present. So, you know, choosing the 50th percentile, what does that mean for the 50% of the population that is unable to you know, meet their estimated housing expenses? Those were all part of it, but trying to balance, you know, the equity and trying to make sure that, you know, disparities are part of the conversation, but also keeping in mind the feasibility of the living wage number, right? Because the more you go up, right, if we were to choose the 90th percentile, that $20.39 could very well be like a $32 an hour living wage. So balancing the equity versus what is kind of feasible. And then we had a July 2022 vote for the 70th percentile. So that $20.39 is the 75th percentile wage in the county. So this means that it would cover about 75% of working adults' estimated expenses. 25% of working adults would still need more. Oh, I forgot. Living wage will be updating this every other year. That is biannually, not to be confused with biannually, which I had to find out. So yeah, so the next time we'll be updating that wage, it will be in $2023, I think.
All right. So thank you, Courtney, for sharing kind of like high level of what all went into the complexities of talking about fair and living wages. As you saw, we gave you a snippet of what happened in a year for us to make a decision on why we selected the 75th percentile and really all of the things. I mean, it's so important to, I think I am not a mother, but I have worked in childcare for various years of including, you know, the before and after school and the summer, because your children, somebody needs to take care of them. Just because they're not in school doesn't mean that, you know, they can just wander around, and that is a reality of an expense. And so there were definitely lots of things that we discussed thoroughly, as you have seen. And so now we get to the part where we get into a little bit more of the detail and the opportunity of breakout groups, which, as you see, there'll be the living wage certification breakout group, and then the data and methodology. And I believe I'm turning it over to Shamika.
Yes, thank you so much, Vivian and Courtney. And so soon you should be able to see the options for you to self-select which breakout room you would like to attend. If at any point you would like to kind of change rooms or shift, you're welcome to do that. You could come back to the main room, and then we can have you select to go into a separate breakout room. But if you click the breakout room options at the bottom, I believe, or is Courtney, I'm thinking something is going to pop up for them to be able to select as well.
It should be open now.
Great. And I think I see people leaving. See you all soon.
All right, Shamika, I'm going to hop into my breakout room.
All right. Hey, Brooke, I see you're having trouble. Which room did you would like to attend? I can assign you from here.
Thank you. I would like to go to the certification program.
All right. I will send you there now.
Thank you. I never saw anything pop up on the bottom.
No
I
worries.
saw the link on the chat, but I couldn't.
Gotcha. You should go in there in just a moment. Living wage certification. Here you go.
Oh, there it is.
There we are. And everyone is joining us back. Welcome. I hope we didn't cut you off mid-conversation or mid-thought, but I'm so glad to have you back with us. And I believe Courtney or Vivian will be closing our session. And so I'm looking for there we are. I see you all. And so you're welcome I can't hear her. Are you speaking, Vivian?
I am now.
There we go. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My computer decided that it was now time to tell me to re-log in. Thank you, Courtney. I can't see any of I have to sign in again. So as we know, there are going to be implications for all of the program. And so some of the implications that we've gone into, if we go to the next slide, is we talked briefly about the benefits cliff. So, while a livable wage will increase financial stability for people in our community, there are these limitations. So as wages increase, individuals will lose some of the public benefits that they are receiving. So that's an implication and a limitation. As Courtney mentioned earlier, is that this wage is for the 75% of the community. And so 25%, it's still not enough. And the individuals that actually fall within this 25% are going to be single mothers and people of color. And so thinking about that it is still not enough at the $20.39 for 2021 wage. There's also cost offsetting. What is that going to look like for businesses that are trying to raise their wages to pay livable wages? Is it going to take away from operations, goods, services? Maybe they're going to have less employees, and these are all just kind of thoughts of what we think might happen. Then number 4 is the poverty measure. So the poverty measure is not an accurate capture of people's economic struggles. And so just kind of lifting that up as we continue doing our work. Nonprofits. For nonprofits, this is going to be hard. And we heard it as we discussed it, because we already struggle with, in the line item of salary and wages, when we ask funders for funding, this is typically the one where we don't ask as much. And if we do, we are informed that we should ask for less in this area. So what is that implication for nonprofits, and who will be able to really participate in the program? And then, as I mentioned, data, I mentioned this in our breakout group, but data, unfortunately, there is no existing quantitative data in the United States that supports the livable wage certification programs. It is something that we are going to be doing as a part of it, because we want to show what happens on the economic side of things and for families in our community. But this is something that all we have is anecdotal data to support this in the entire country. And so those are some of the implications and limitations. And then as we go into the next steps and call to action. So here, if we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. As we continue the development of this, is business owners. If you know of anyone or if you're a business owner, we would like for you to participate in the learning sessions that we are going to have as we continue to learn and develop the program. There's also for employees. If you are impacted by a living wage, if you're making less than $20.39, we invite you to participate in these learning sessions as well. And consumers, whenever we have the program ready and live, we want you to support living wage certified businesses. So we will have kind of like stickers, or we're not sure what it's going to be yet, but you will know which businesses are certified living wage businesses, so that we can increase supporting those businesses to pay fair and living wages. Number 4 is to inform others about paying fair and living wages, and what does the number look like, and what are all of the things that went into ABC's and Foresight Futures thinking of what should be included in this wage. So share learned knowledge. We are still in the phase of providing what all went into it. So once we have that, we'll be happy to share it with you. And then lastly is join ABC. Maybe you want to become a coalition member and join in the committee as we continue to develop this. And so I'm going to leave you with the last slide, which is a QR code. And I'll also I'll share the form in the chat so that you all could tell us how you want to participate in this. Again, as an employer, as a worker, or simply just know what ABC is doing and what part of advocacy you can join in, and or becoming a coalition member. So I'm gonna turn it back to Shamika, and thank you all for being here today. We hope that what you heard and what you learned will continue the conversations throughout our county and the state about paying fair and living wages. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Vivian. Thank you, Courtney. I do see that Megan put a question in the chat on how small business owners could join the learning sessions. And so Megan, if I'm correct, if she scanned that QR code, she would be able to get more information on that. And then we will also follow up with all of those who registered for the event to include the slides from today's session, in addition to any notes that we may have captured. And I know we were a little bit short on time, and so for any questions that came into us that were unanswered, we'll try to have some responses to that as well that we can share back out with you all. And I believe the Women's Fund, we also have submitted us a short poll for you all that should have already, that will pop up on your screen. If you just want to take a few seconds to complete that, that will be great. But we just want to have an idea of, since this is our last Ideas to Action series, how was the experience for you? And so how many of you may have participated before? How many of you may have enjoyed the information that you received today, how helpful it was for you? And then also, as we're thinking about our upcoming annual luncheon, wanting to see if the community can help us a little bit with our theme as well, as we kind of think about community and how we can work together to impact change. And so that is kind of all we have for you today. And just want to thank you again for being a part of us and joining in conversation. I hope that you all left with at least one idea of how you can take action locally to help to improve the living wage here in Forsyth County. And just thank you all so much again for being here. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you, everyone.